In the shadowed eaves of the ancient forest, where moonlight fractured like shattered promises, a child's cry pierced the eternal silence of the Alpha King's domain. Ilara Voss stumbled through the underbrush, her small frame trembling under the weight of the night. At 8 years old, she was a wisp of a girl, her auburn hair matted with mud and tears, her simple dress torn from thorns that clawed like vengeful spirits. The world she knew had crumbled hours ago, her village on the edge of the whispering woods, a fragile human settlement, overrun by rogue wolves from a rival pack. Her mother, Leora, the village healer, had been the first to fall under their assault, not with fangs but with fists and chains, dragged away for her forbidden knowledge of wolfsbane and silver rites. Ilara's lungs burned as she ran, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue from bitten lips. The forest whispered secrets in the wind, rustling leaves like distant howls, branches creaking like breaking bones. She had seen the Alpha King once, from afar, during a tense parley between packs. He was Thorn Blackwood, the immortal sovereign of the Silverfang clan, a figure of legend whispered in both fear and reverence. Over 3 centuries old, born in the blood-soaked fields of a forgotten war, Thorn had risen from an orphaned pup to unchallenged ruler. His trauma etched deep, the slaughter of his own kin by human hunters, leaving him with a guilt that gnawed like silver in veins. He desired peace, a fragile redemption, but solitude was his armor, his ethics a code forged in loss. Protect the weak, but never let them close. The child's cry echoed again, raw and desperate, as she burst into the clearing before the Blackwood Citadel. The castle loomed, its spires jagged against the starry sky, ivy-cloaked stones glowing faintly under a canopy of eternal mist. Guards, massive werewolves in shifted forms, flanked the iron gates, their eyes gleaming amber in the torchlight. Ilara collapsed at their paws, sobbing, "They're hurting my mom. Please, the bad wolves. They're hurting her." One guard snarled, hackles rising, but Thorn emerged from the shadows before violence could erupt. He moved with predatory grace, his tall frame clad in a dark velvet cloak, silver hair falling like moonlight over piercing blue eyes. At 30 in human years, but ancient in truth, he carried the weight of eternities, immortal, not through curse, but through the Alpha's bloodline, a rare gift that bound him to the moon's cycle. Guilt shadowed him. He had turned away from human pleas before, letting boarders claim lives to preserve his pack's fragile truce. Yet something in the girl's plea stirred the embers of his buried compassion. "Child," he said, his voice a low rumble like thunder over hills, kneeling to her level. The air around him hummed with restrained power, the scent of pine and earth mingling with the faint coppery trace of old blood. Ilara looked up, her green eyes wide with terror, and in that gaze, Thorn saw his own lost youth, innocence shattered. "They took her to the old mill," she whimpered, clutching his sleeve. She said the Alpha would help if it came to this." Thorn's jaw tightened. The old mill was neutral ground, but rogues from the Ironclaw pack had been testing boundaries, their Alpha a brute named Garrick, driven by a thirst for territory that echoed Thorn's own past follies. To intervene meant war, to ignore, the death of innocence. He lifted Ilara gently, her small body light as a fallen leaf, and carried her inside. The citadel's halls were a labyrinth of flickering candlelight, tapestries depicting ancient battles in threads of gold and crimson, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and aged wood. In the great hall, fire crackled in a hearth carved from obsidian, casting dancing shadows that played across Thorn's face like memories he couldn't outrun. He set Ilara down on a fur rug, summoning a healer from his pack, a Dhampir woman named Celine, half vampire by bloodline, her pale skin luminous, her bond to Thorn one of quiet loyalty forged in shared solitude. Celine, born in the 18th century to a vampire sire and human mother, had her own scars, Abandoned by her immortal father, she sought purpose in protecting the vulnerable, her desires tangled in unspoken affection for Thorn's unyielding strength. "Rest here," Thorn murmured to Alara, his hand lingering on her shoulder, feeling the fragility of her mortal pulse. The child's story unfolded in halting whispers. Leora's abduction as punishment for aiding Silverfang's spies, the rogue's laughter echoing like shattering glass. Thorn's mind raced, ethics warring within. His code demanded justice, but love for his pack, for the eternity he guarded, whispered caution. As dawn's first light filtered through arched windows, staining the stone with roseate hues, Thorn made his choice. He would go alone, a shadow in the mist, to the mill. But as he rose, Alara's hand caught his, her voice a fragile thread. "Promise you'll bring her back." The weight of that promise settled like a crown of thorns. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the distant scent of blood and betrayal. Thorn stepped into the fog-shrouded woods, the citadel fading behind him, unaware that this act would unravel the threads of his immortal isolation, binding him to a mortal's fate in ways that defied even the moon's pull. Thorn moved through the forest like a specter, the mist coiling around his boots as if reluctant to let him pass. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and impending rain, each step crunching leaves that sounded like whispered warnings. His immortal senses sharpened the night. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures, the faint, acrid tang of fear sweat from the mill ahead. The old mill stood on the river's edge, its weathered timbers groaning under the weight of centuries, water wheels frozen in eternal decay. Moonlight pierced the canopy, silvering the scene in ethereal glow, while inside, torchlight flickered through cracked windows, casting elongated shadows that danced like tormented souls. Thorn's heart, beating with the slow, deliberate rhythm of one who had outlived empires, clenched at the sounds emanating from within. Muffled cries, the crack of a whip, low growls of satisfaction. He slipped past the perimeter guards, two Ironclaw betas whose negligence spoke of overconfidence. Ethics guided his hand. He sought no needless death, only retrieval. But as he peered through a splintered door, rage ignited in his veins like liquid silver. Leora Voss hung from iron chains bolted to the rafters, her body a map of bruises, auburn hair, much like her daughter's, cascading in bloodied waves. At 35, Leora was a woman forged in quiet resilience. Orphaned young in a plague that swept her coastal village, she had turned to healing arts, her trauma a deep-seated fear of abandonment that drove her to aid even enemies. Her desires were simple: Alara's safety, a life unmarred by the supernatural wars that bled into human realms. Now, she endured Garrick's interrogation, the rogue alpha circling her like a predator savoring prey. "You think your herbs can stop us?" Garrick snarled, his voice gravelly, face twisted in a scar-riddled visage from battles long past. At 40 in appearance but feral in spirit, Garrick embodied unchecked ambition, his pack a ragtag force of exiles haunted by their own guilts, disloyalty to former alphas, betrayals that left them marked. Thorn's entry was a blur of motion, silent and lethal. He disarmed the nearest guard with a twist that cracked bone without killing, his claws extending just enough to warn. Garrick whirled, eyes blazing yellow, but Thorn was upon him, slamming the alpha against the wall with controlled fury. The mill shuddered, dust sifting from beams like falling stars. "Release her!" Thorn commanded, his tone laced with the authority of ages, the air vibrating with alpha dominance. Leora lifted her head, eyes widening in shock, her breath ragged, tasting of blood and defiance. Garrick laughed, a guttural sound echoing off the stones. "The mighty Thorn Blackwood, playing savior to humans, your pack weakens you." The fight erupted in a symphony of snarls and impacts, fists against flesh, wood splintering under supernatural force. Thorn's immortality granted endurance, but Garrick's pack closed in, 5 strong, their forms shifting midway between man and beast. Leora, chains rattling, watched in horrified awe, her mind reeling. She had known of the wolves, treated their wounds in secret, but this, Thorn's intervention, was a revelation, stirring a forbidden curiosity in her battered soul. Thorn dispatched 2 assailants with non-lethal precision, pinning Garrick in a chokehold that forced submission. "This ends now," he growled, the scent of sweat and fear thick in the air. Garrick yielded, signaling retreat, his pack slinking into the shadows with curses on their lips. Freed, Leora collapsed into Thorn's arms, her weight a mortal anchor against his eternal strength. Up close, she saw the complexity in his eyes, solitude etched like fine lines, guilt a shadow that softened his resolve. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, fingers brushing a scar on his jaw from a human blade centuries ago. "Because a child asked," he replied simply, lifting her as rain began to patter against the roof, cold droplets seeping through cracks like tears from the heavens. They returned to the citadel under cover of storm, the path slick with mud that clung like regrets. Ilara waited in the hall, her face lighting with joy and relief as she rushed to her mother. The reunion was tender, tears mingling with laughter, but Thorn lingered at the edges, watching. Leora's gaze met his, a silent question forming, gratitude laced with something deeper, a pull toward the immortal who had risked war for strangers. As the family embraced, Celine approached Thorn, her Dhampir senses attuned to the shift in his aura. "You've invited shadows into your light," she murmured, her voice a silken thread born of her own longing for connection. Thorn nodded, the weight of his choice settling. Outside, lightning cracked, illuminating the forest in stark whites and blacks, mirroring the fracture in his once impenetrable world. What had begun as mercy now whispered of entanglement, a thread pulling human fragility into the heart of eternity. Dawn broke over the citadel like a hesitant lover, painting the stone walls in hues of pale gold and lingering gray. Inside the healer's quarters, Leora rested on a bed of soft linens, the air scented with lavender and healing salves that Celine had applied with gentle hands. Ilara curled beside her, finally asleep, her small chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. But Leora could not close her eyes. Pain throbbed through her body, a dull ache that paled against the turmoil in her soul. Thorn stood at the window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded grounds, his silhouette framed by the soft light filtering through leaded glass. The room was a sanctuary of warmth, candles guttering on a wooden mantel, their flames casting flickering reflections on a silver mirror that hung crookedly, its surface etched with faint runes of protection. That mirror, an heirloom from Thorn's early centuries, became the silent witness to this unfolding drama, reflecting not just faces, but fragments of unspoken truths. Leora shifted, wincing, and spoke into the quiet. "You didn't have to do this, my kind. We're nothing to yours." Thorn turned, his blue eyes holding depths like storm-tossed seas. "Every soul bears a mark, human or wolf, yours called to mine." He approached, sitting on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. Up close, the texture of his presence was palpable, the faint warmth of his skin, the subtle musk of forest and fur, the steady pulse that belied his immortality. She studied him, tracing the lines of his face, high cheekbones scarred faintly from battles, lips pressed in perpetual contemplation. Leora's own biography unfolded in her mind. Born to fishermen in a storm-ravaged port, losing her parents to the sea's wrath at 15, she had wandered inland, honing her gifts amid rejection. Desires? A stable home for Ilara, perhaps a companion who saw beyond her scars. Trauma lingered in nightmares of abandonment, making trust a fragile bloom. "Why me?" she pressed, her voice a whisper, fingers absently touching the chain's raw marks on her wrists. Thorn hesitated, the ritual of confession beginning, an intimate unveiling. "Guilt is my shadow. Long ago I let a village burn to save my pack, the cries. They echo still." His hand covered hers, a touch electric, resisted yet inevitable. The air thickened with unsaid words, the candle flames leaning as if drawn to their proximity. Ilara stirred, murmuring in sleep, and Leora pulled away, rationalizing the spark as gratitude. But Thorn felt it, a pull toward her mortality, her light piercing his eternal dusk. The conversation deepened, philosophical undercurrents surfacing. The beauty in human suffering, how it redeemed the immortal's cold detachment. As midday sun climbed, a messenger arrived, Garrick's pack demanding reparations, threatening escalation. Thorn's choice loomed, exile the humans or face war. He paced, the floorboards creaking like old bones, while Leora watched, her heart torn between fleeing and staying. In a moment of revelation, Thorn knelt before her. "Stay, let me protect what I've claimed." The words hung, a ritual binding, life intertwined with eternity, love's curse dawning. Leora nodded, tears tracing paths down her cheeks, the mirror capturing the fracture, joy shadowed by fear. Outside, birdsong mingled with distant howls, the world holding its breath. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you." Twilight draped the citadel in velvet shadows, the air alive with the chirp of crickets and the soft patter of evening dew on leaves. Leora walked the inner gardens with Ilara, the child's hand small and trusting in hers, while Thorn trailed at a distance, his presence a comforting specter. Roses bloomed in defiant crimson against the encroaching night, their petals soft as whispered secrets, but one bush bore a single dried bloom, thorn pricked and withered, a symbol of fragile beauty on the brink, mirroring Leora's own teetering existence. Celine joined them, her Dampier grace silent on the gravel paths, her long black hair swaying like midnight silk. At 200 years, she had wandered courts and crypts, her trauma rooted in her sire's abandonment after her birth, leaving her to navigate a world that feared her hybrid blood. Desires burned quietly, belonging, perhaps to Thorn, whose ethical solitude mirrored her own loneliness. She eyed Leora with a mix of protectiveness and subtle envy, the human woman's arrival stirring dormant affections. "You heal quickly," Celine observed, handing Leora a vial of elixir that shimmered like liquid moonlight. The scent was herbal, earthy, masking the underlying bite of supernatural essence. Leora accepted it, her fingers brushing Celine's cool skin. "Your care mends more than wounds." Conversations flowed as they strolled, introspective exchanges on memory's weight, how the immortal forgot faces while humans clung to every scar. Ilara chased fireflies, her laughter a bright counterpoint to the gathering dusk. But peace shattered with the toll of the alarm bell, deep and resonant, vibrating through the stone like a heartbeat. Scouts burst from the tree line, fur matted with blood. Iron claws at the border, ambush party led by Garrick's lieutenant. Thorn's face hardened, the alpha within surging. He commanded the defense with cadenced precision, slow deliberations giving way to swift action. Leora clutched Ilara, her maternal instinct clashing with the pull toward Thorn. "Stay inside," he urged, his hand cupping her cheek, the touch lingering, sensual in its restraint, evoking the texture of velvet against skin. The battle unfolded beyond the walls, a sensory storm, clashes of claw and fang echoing like thunder, the metallic scent of blood mingling with rain-soaked earth. Thorn fought at the forefront, his form shifting seamlessly, muscles rippling under furred hide, eyes glowing with feral light. He spared lives where possible, his ethics a guiding star amid chaos, but Garrick's forces pressed relentlessly, driven by grudge. From a turret window, Leora watched, heart pounding in sync with the distant roars. Selene stood beside her, whispering counsel. His immortality is no shield against loss. The Dhampir's words carried weight, hinting at her own unspoken bond with the king, a romance tempered by duty. As the skirmish waned, Thorn returned, bloodied but unbowed, a gash across his shoulder knitting before their eyes. He collapsed into a chair by the fire, exhaustion etching his features. Leora approached, dabbing the wound with a cloth, her touch intimate, resisted no longer. "You fight for us," she said softly, the dried rose on the table beside them, crumbling under her absent fingers. "For redemption," he replied, his gaze locking with hers, the room's candlelight haloing them in golden warmth. Alara slept nearby, oblivious, but the air hummed with transformation, love's inevitability dawning, a curse that promised both light and shadow. Yet as night deepened, a captured Ironclaw spy revealed a deeper plot. Garrick sought not just land, but an ancient artifact hidden in the citadel, one that could sever immortal bonds. Thorn's choice crystallized: protect his new family or safeguard eternity. The fire popped, embers scattering like fleeing stars, leaving the question to burn unanswered. Moonlight filtered through the citadel's library, a vast chamber of towering shelves laden with tomes bound in leather and whispered spells. Dust motes danced in the beams, illuminated like fleeting souls, while the scent of aged paper and flickering oil lamps created an atmosphere of hushed intimacy. Thorn and Leora sat across from each other at a scarred oak table, maps unfurled before them. The dried rose placed centrally as a talisman of their budding connection, its petals curling inward, a reminder of vulnerability. Ilara played nearby, stacking wooden blocks into precarious towers, her innocence a balm against the tension. Selene paced the edges, her Dhampir senses alert, the soft rustle of her gown the only sound breaking the contemplative silence. The group's dynamics shifted palpably. Leora's presence humanized Thorn, drawing him from isolation, while Selene's loyalty deepened into quiet longing, her eyes lingering on the king's profile. "We must retrieve the artifact before Garrick," Thorn said, tracing a route on the map with a finger scarred from countless wars. The relic, the lunar shard, was a crystal said to bind or break alpha immortality, hidden in the catacombs beneath the citadel. His voice carried philosophical weight. "Eternity is a choice, not a gift. To lose it, or share it?" Leora leaned forward, her bruises fading, but her spirit alight with determination. "And if it means peace for Ilara?" Her touch on his hand was deliberate now, the warmth of her skin against his cooler one sparking a sensual undercurrent, slow, like honey dripping over stone. She rationalized it as alliance, but the pull was undeniable, weaving love through suffering's loom. Selena interjected, her tone measured. "The shard demands a ritual, a choice of blood, mortal or immortal." Her words hung heavy, evoking her own hybrid existence, the guilt of surviving when her human mother had not. Desires flickered in her gaze, to claim Thorn or to yield to this new light. As they planned, introspection gave way to action. The trio, Thorn, Leora, and Selene, descended into the catacombs that night, torches casting elongated shadows on moss-draped walls. The air grew chill, textured with the drip of water and the echo of their footsteps, like heartbeats in a tomb. Ilara remained above, guarded, her absence a poignant ache for Leora. Deeper in, they encountered traps, illusory mists that conjured ghosts of past traumas. Thorn faced visions of his slaughtered family, their accusatory eyes piercing his guilt. Leora confronted waves of abandonment, faceless figures turning away. Selene whispered encouragements, her hand steadying them, revealing her own strength. At the chamber's heart, the shard pulsed on a pedestal, glowing with inner fire. But guardians stirred, spectral wolves, remnants of ancient alphas. The fight was visceral, claws raking stone, breaths heaving in the confined space, blood, hot and slick, splattering the floor. Thorn shielded Leora, taking a spectral bite that burned like silver, his immortality straining. In the ritual's climax, Leora placed her hand on the crystal, her mortal blood awakening it. For choice, she declared, the air shimmering with power. The shard hummed, offering visions, Thorn mortal beside her, or eternal alone. He pulled back, the decision deferred, as they fled with the relic. Emerging into the night, rain lashed their faces, washing away grime, but not the ethical dilemma now etched deeper. Back in the library, as Ilara rushed to embrace her mother, Thorn stared at the dried rose, its form crumbling further. Love had transformed them, but the curse of choice loomed, eternity or the fragile beauty of now. Thunder rolled, the storm mirroring the turmoil within, leaving silence heavy with unspoken vows. The citadel's great hall thrummed with the low murmur of pack elders, their forms gathered around a long table lit by candelabras whose flames wavered like uncertain fates. The air was rich with the aroma of spiced wine and roasting meats, but tension undercut the feast, a ritual gathering to affirm alliances in the wake of the artifact's retrieval. The dried rose sat in a silver bowl at the table's center, its desiccated petals a stark emblem amid the opulence, drawing eyes like a wound in velvet. Thorn presided at the head, his posture regal yet weary, the gash from the catacombs fully healed, but the scar of decision lingering. Leora sat to his right, Ilara on her lap, the child's wide eyes absorbing the scene with innocent wonder. Selene flanked the other side, her dhampir poise masking the storm of emotions, loyalty to Thorn clashing with the budding romance she sensed blooming between him and the human. Debate swirled. The elders urged using the lunar shard to crush Garrick, severing his immortality as retribution. Thorn's voice cut through, cadenced and philosophical. Power redeems only if chosen wisely. To curse another with mortality, is that not the true shadow? Leora listened, her hand absently stroking Ilara's hair, the texture soft against her calloused palms. Her presence here was a transformation, from broken healer to integral thread in the pack's tapestry. Yet doubt gnawed, her mortality a ticking curse, love for Thorn inevitable yet resisted in quiet moments of rational fear. As the night deepened, the hall emptied, leaving the intimate circle. Selene rose, her voice soft. The ritual calls for a witness of the heart. She confessed then, in the flickering light, her feelings for Thorn, a redemptive love born of shared solitude, sensual in its unspoken depth, like the brush of silk on shadowed skin. Thorn's eyes softened, guilt surfacing. You've been my light in darkness, Selene, but choices evolve. The air thickened, emotions raw, the dried rose's scent faintly earthy, evoking decay and rebirth. Leora stood, pulling Ilara close, her dilemma ethical. Yield to this new bond or retreat to human fragility? A revelation struck, Garrick's forces massing at dawn, the artifact their target. Action surged. Thorn, Leora, and Selene armed themselves, the women's resolve a quiet fire. The defense was a ballet of shadow and fury, dawn's first light breaking as iron claws breached the outer walls. Clashes rang out, steel on claw, grunts echoing in the mist. Thorn fought with Leora at his side, her knowledge of herbs turning the tide with thrown vials of wolfsbane mist. Selene's dhampir speed felled foes, her movements a deadly grace. In the melee's heart, Garrick lunged at Leora, but Thorn intercepted, the two alphas grappling in a whirlwind of power. The shard, clutched in Thorn's fist, pulsed, demanding the choice: end Garrick's eternity or spare him for peace. Thorn hesitated, visions flashing, redemption through mercy. He shattered the crystal instead, its light exploding in a cascade of silver shards, binding Garrick in chains of light, forcing submission without death. As the enemy retreated, the hall fell silent, the pack cheering faintly. Leora approached Thorn, their embrace profound, love's redemption tasting of salt and victory. Celine watched, a poignant smile on her lips, her role transformed. But in the quiet aftermath, as sunlight gilded the room, Elara whispered, "Will they come back?" The question hung, the dried rose now dust, symbolizing the fragile peace won and the shadows yet to stir. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Noon sun bathed the citadel's ramparts in unrelenting gold, but within the private solar, shadows lingered in the corners, chased only partially by the hearth's dying embers. The room was a haven of intimacy. Plush tapestries depicting lunar cycles in silvers and indigos, a four-poster bed draped in deep crimson, the air scented with jasmine from a vase of fresh blooms. The symbolic rose, now replanted in soil nearby, showed tentative green shoots, a metaphor for renewal amid ruin. Thorn and Leora lay entwined, the afterglow of their first true union, a sensory tapestry, the silk of sheets against skin, the slow rhythm of breaths sinking like heartbeats, the faint taste of salt from shared tears of release. Elara napped in an adjoining chamber, watched by a trusted nursemaid. Celine had withdrawn to the gardens, granting them this stolen peace. Her own heart, a complex weave of acceptance and quiet ache. Leora's fingers traced the planes of Thorn's chest, feeling the steady thrum beneath, immortal vitality that both awed and terrified her. "This love, it's a bridge over abyss," she murmured, her voice husky, philosophical introspection blending with sensual aftertaste. Trauma resurfaced in whispers, her past abandonments making this bond a redemptive anchor, yet cursed by the specter of her mortality. Thorn held her closer, his touch reverent, exploring the curves of her form with the tenderness of one who had known endless nights alone. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. You've made me question that choice. His ethics shone through, the desire to share eternity, but only if freely given, a ritual of mutual transformation. Their dialogue deepened, voices low against the distant hum of pack life outside. They spoke of faith and despair, how suffering's beauty lay in its capacity to forge light from shadow. Leora's disillusions, from village outcast to pack consort, melted in his gaze, inevitable love blooming despite rational fears of outliving Elara or fading before Thorn. A knock shattered the idyll. Celine, face pale, bearing news. Scouts report Garrick rallying remnants. He seeks not land, but vengeance, targeting the child. The Damper's eyes met Leora's, a silent pact forming, her affection for Thorn yielding to a broader redemption, protecting the family he now cherished. Action propelled them. Thorn rose, donning armor that gleamed like moonlight on water, while Leora and Celine prepared defenses, herbs laced with shard fragments, Dampier wards etched in blood. Elara was hidden in the deepest vaults, her cries muffled as Leora kissed her farewell. The assault came at dusk, iron claws slipping through mists like ghosts. The battle raged across courtyards, sensory chaos of snarls blending with rain's lash, blood's copper tang mixing with mud. Thorn commanded from the front, his shifts fluid, protecting Leora as she hurled alchemical fire. Celine fought beside her, their alliance fierce, claws and cunning felling foes. In a pivotal clash, Garrick cornered Elara's guardians, but Leora intervened, her scream a maternal force that stunned him. Thorn arrived, grappling the rogue in a duel textured with history, fists pounding like war drums, breaths ragged in the downpour. The choice crystallized: spare Garrick again or end the threat. Thorn disarmed him, forcing a vow of exile under Moon's witness. Garrick fled, broken, the pack's howls fading into night. Returning, exhausted, Thorn found Leora cradling Alara, Selene binding wounds. The embrace that followed was redemptive, love's light-piercing tragedy, the rose's shoots stronger now. Yet as stars wheeled overhead, a faint whisper echoed from the vaults. An ancient curse stirred by the shard's destruction, promising trials yet to come. The chapel within the citadel's forgotten wing stood as a relic of forgotten devotions, its vaulted ceilings arching like the ribs of some ancient beast, stained glass windows capturing the twilight in fractured mosaics of crimson and indigo. Dust motes swirled lazily in the slanting beams, illuminated like wayward spirits seeking absolution, while the air hung heavy with the lingering scent of smoldering incense and cool stone, a texture that clung to the skin like unspoken regrets. Candles lined the altar in uneven rows, their flames guttering against invisible drafts, casting elongated shadows that danced across the flagstone floor, as if enacting silent dramas of light and loss. At the altar's edge, the replanted rose rested in a slender crystal vase, its new leaves unfurling tentatively, veins pulsing faintly green against the petal's velvet softness. A living symbol of the soul's quiet resurrection. Thorns retracted but ever present, whispering of beauty born from suffering soil. Thorn knelt before the altar, his massive frame bowed in rare vulnerability, broad shoulders hunched as if bearing the cumulative weight of 3 centuries' solitude. His silver hair fell forward, catching the candlelight in threads of molten gold, and his hands, calloused from battles eternal, clasped loosely before him, fingers tracing the worn grooves of a wooden rosary, an artifact from his mortal youth long before the Alpha's blood had claimed his immortality. The chapel's acoustics amplified his solitude, turning each measured breath into an echo that reverberated off the walls, mingling with the distant creak of settling pews, sounds like the sighs of old bones finally at rest. Guilt, that immutable companion, coiled in his chest. It was not just the recent battles with Garrick that haunted him, but the deeper scars, the village he had let burn in his early reign, the lovers lost to time's inexorable pull, the pack members fallen because his ethics demanded mercy over slaughter. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, yet in choosing eternity, he had condemned himself to an endless vigil of what-ifs. Leora entered softly, her footsteps a gentle intrusion on the sacred hush, the hem of her simple woolen gown whispering against the stone like a confidant's murmur. She had been drawn here by an unspoken bond, a pull that had woven itself through their shared trials, from the mill's shadowed rescue to the catacombs' arcane perils. At 35, her body still bore the faint echoes of her ordeals, faded bruises blooming like dark roses on her arms, a subtle limp from the chain's bite, but her green eyes held a newfound clarity, tempered by the fire of survival and the slow-burning inevitability of love. Orphaned by the sea's cruel caprice in her coastal youth, she had carried abandonment like a shadow, her desires once narrowed to Alara's safety and a healer's quiet purpose. Now, in Thorn's orbit, those desires expanded, aching for a transcendence that bridged her fragile mortality with his boundless night. She slid onto the pew beside him, her hand finding his with the ease of familiarity, her touch warm and alive against his cooler skin, textured with the subtle roughness of her healer's palms, scars from grinding herbs, faint calluses from years of mending the broken. "You seek absolution in these stones?" she asked, her voice a low cadence, laced with compassion that cut through the chapel's solemnity like a candle's flame-piercing fog. Thorn turned his head slightly, his blue eyes meeting hers, depths swirling like storm-tossed seas under a perpetual eclipse. "Absolution is a mortal fancy, Leora. For the immortal, guilt is the true curse, etched deeper than any fang or blade." He paused, his thumb brushing the back of her hand in slow circles, a gesture both reverent and sensual, evoking the velvet slide of shadowed intimacy. In that touch, he confessed fragments of his biography. Born amid the chaos of a medieval clan war in the mist-veiled highlands, orphaned when human hunters slaughtered his kin for their pelts and myths, he had clawed his way to Alpha through rivers of blood, his traumas a forge that tempered his ethics. Protect the weak, but never again let love's fragility shatter his resolve. Desires? Once, simple companionship. Now, a legacy woven with her light, a redemption that dared to humanize his eternity. Their conversation unfolded like a ritual, voices weaving philosophy and raw emotion in the flickering glow. They spoke of the interplay between life and eternity, how memory preserved the exquisite beauty of human suffering, the sharp sting of loss that honed the soul, while the immortal's forgetfulness offered a hollow mercy, erasing faces until only echoes remained. Leora shared her own depths, her words introspective and poetic, the disillusions of her village life. Cast out for her forbidden knowledge of wolfsbane and silver rites, her fears of leaving Alara adrift in a world that devoured the vulnerable. Love resists, rationalizes, yet arrives inevitable, she murmured, leaning closer, the air between them thickening with sensual restraint, the faint scent of her skin, lavender and earth, mingling with the chapel's incense. The moment crested in a slow kiss, lips meeting like embers reigniting after a long winter, soft and exploratory, tasting of salt from unshed tears and the honeyed promise of shared vulnerability. Thorn's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the curve of her jaw, the texture electric, a bridge over the abyss of their divided worlds. But the intimacy shattered with the soft click of the chapel door. Celine entered, her dhampir grace rendering her footsteps near silent, a shadow given form in the half-light. Her face, pale as moon-kissed marble, was etched with urgency, long black hair cascading like midnight silk over a gown of deep burgundy. At 2 centuries, Celine carried her hybrid existence like a veiled blade, born to a vampire sire who abandoned her in the cradle of a crumbling Venetian palazzo, raised by a human mother who withered under the sun's gaze, her traumas a labyrinth of rejection and half-belonging. Desires flickered in her crimson-tinged eyes, once a fierce, unspoken romance with Thorn. Born of shared solitude in the Citadel's endless nights, now transmuted into a profound loyalty, a guardian's devotion that yielded to the greater light Leora had brought. She bore a missive in her hand, sealed with black wax imprinted with the iron claw sigil, its edges frayed as if carried through thorns. "The curse awakens," Celine said, her voice measured yet resonant in the chapel's hush, handing the parchment to Thorn. Visions plagued the pack, whispers of the shard's destruction stirring ancient magics. Garrick's exile was the spark. He rallies remnants in the shadowed veils, but this is deeper. The echo demands a final ritual, one of blood and vow to seal the fracture. Thorn broke the seal, his jaw tightening as he scanned the crude warnings scrawled in blood-red ink. Threats to Alara, vows of vengeance that twisted the air with malice. Leora's hand tightened on his, her maternal instinct flaring like a struck flint. Celine's gaze met hers, a silent pact forming in that shared glance. Enemies no more, but allies forged in the crucible of love's redemptive fire. The trio convened swiftly, Ilara joining them from the adjoining cloister. Her small face wide-eyed with trust, auburn curls tousled from a brief nap. At 8, she was the heart of their fragile circle, her innocence a beacon amid the encroaching dark. Trauma from the mill's horrors lingering in nightmares, but desires simple. Her mother's embrace, the Alpha's protective shadow. The ritual, as ancient texts revealed in the chapel's hidden alcove, required descent to the Citadel's pulsating heart, a cavern deep beneath where lunar magic thrummed like a dormant god's breath. They journeyed down spiral stairs carved from living rock, torches sputtering in iron sconces, casting dramatic shadows that twisted like specters on the damp walls. The air thickened with the musk of earth and arcane hum, each step echoing like a heartbeat in a vast tomb, water dripping from stalactites in rhythmic plinks that mimicked distant tears. Ilara clung to Leora's skirts, her small hand warm and trembling, while Celine led with Dhampir senses attuned to hidden perils, her claws subtly extended for any threat. In the cavern's vast maw, bioluminescent crystals embedded in the walls gleamed like frozen tears, pulsing with an otherworldly light that bathed the space in ethereal blues and silvers. The curse manifested not as brute force, but as insidious illusions, coiling from the shadows like smoke given malice. Thorn relived his family's slaughter in vivid torment, phantom arrows piercing his chest, the acrid scent of burning thatch filling his lungs, accusatory eyes of his kin boring into his soul, forcing him to his knees as guilt's weight crushed him anew. Leora confronted waves of abandonment, faceless villagers turning away in a spectral marketplace. Ilara's cries fading into the mist, the sea's roar swallowing her parents' voices, pain so visceral it drew blood from bitten lips, her body racked with sobs that echoed off the crystals. Celine faced her sire's rejection in a vision of crumbling opulence, the vampire's cold laughter as he vanished into eternal night, her mother's frail form crumbling to dust under sunlight, leaving her alone in a world that branded her monster. Ilara, spared the worst by her youth, saw only blurred shapes of the mill's horrors, whimpering as shadowy wolves nipped at her heels. The illusions clawed at their minds, textures of suffering palpable, the slick chill of illusory blood on skin, the burn of phantom flames, the hollow ache of loss that tasted like ash. United in defiance, they pressed to the core, a swirling vortex of shadow at the cavern's heart, roiling like ink in water, demanding sacrifice to quell its rage. Thorn offered first, slicing his palm with a ritual dagger, his immortal blood welling dark and viscous, dripping onto the stone with a sizzle that lit the air with silver sparks. "For the choices I've made," he intoned, voice steady amid the vortex's howl. Leora followed, tears tracing salty paths down her cheeks, mingling with his blood, mortal essence, fragile yet potent, evoking the beauty of fleeting life. "For the light in suffering," she whispered, her voice breaking like fragile glass. Celine added her vow, pricking her finger to let hybrid blood flow, crimson laced with shadow. "For bonds that transcend blood." Ilara, guided gently, placed her small hand in the pool, her pure light, a child's unscarred hope, sealing the rite with innocent warmth. The ritual built to a shattering revelation, the vortex contracting in fury before exploding outward in a cascade of light, banishing the illusions in a symphony of cracking stone and fading whispers. Pain transmuted to catharsis, the air shimmering with released magic, leaving them breathless and renewed, bonds unbreakable as forged steel. Emerging into the chapel's renewed glow, the candles now burning brighter, unmarred by draughts, Thorn drew Leora into his arms, their embrace profound and lingering, the scent of earth and blood clinging to them like a shared secret. The rose in its vase bloomed fully, petals unfurling in defiant scarlet, a testament to resurrection. Celine stood sentinel, her smile quiet and resolved, the family's guardian eternal. Yet as night winds sighed through the stained glass, rattling pains like distant howls, Thorn held Leora closer, eternity's gift whispering temptations, share it fully or let her mortality's light endure as a poignant counterpoint. The dilemma lingered, a silent ethical precipice at the edge of their hard-won peace, the chapel's shadows lengthening as if to embrace the uncertainty. Midnight claimed the citadel's highest tower with imperial grace, the chamber a austere eyrie perched on spires that pierced the veil of stars, where the night sky wheeled like indifferent witnesses to mortal and immortal dramas alike. The wide balcony open to the elements, unyielding stone balustrades framing a vista of mist-shrouded pines that stretched into infinity, their branches swaying in the crisp mountain wind that carried the sharp bite of pine resin and distant snow, mingling with the faint, heady perfume of the fully bloomed rose placed on a weathered ledge. Its petals vibrant scarlet against the obsidian night, thorns glinting like tiny daggers, an emblem of suffering transmuted into enduring beauty, resilient yet forever marked by the struggle to bloom. Thorn and Leora stood entwined at the balcony's edge, the wind tugging at their cloaks, his a heavy velvet mantle of midnight blue, hers a lighter shawl woven with silver threads that caught the moonlight like captured stars. Alara slept within the tower's inner sanctum, her small form curled under furs in a cradle of oak, watched over by a loyal pack nursemaid whose soft humming lullabies drifted faintly on the breeze. Celine lingered as a vigilant shadow nearby, her dhampir form silhouetted against the tower's arched doorway, eyes scanning the horizon with predatory acuity, her presence a quiet anchor in the night's vastness. Below, the pack had gathered in the courtyards, their forms mere silhouettes in the torchlight's glow, sensing the culmination of trials that had tested the citadel's very foundations. Howls rising sporadically, a chorus of anticipation that vibrated through the stone like the earth's own pulse. "This is the moment of reckoning," Thorn said, his voice a resonant timbre that cut through the wind's whisper, deep and cadenced like thunder rolling over ancient hills. His blue eyes reflected the moon's unyielding silver, depths holding the weight of eternities forged in fire and frost, his silver hair whipping wildly, framing a face etched with the fine lines of contemplative wisdom. The trials had remade him, from solitary alpha burdened by guilt's chains to a sovereign daring to weave mortality into his immortal tapestry. His biography, once a solitary epic of loss, now intertwined with hers. The medieval wars that birthed his power, the ethical code born of kin slaughter, desires evolving from guarded isolation to a fervent wish for legacy, for love that redeemed the shadows. Leora faced him squarely, her green eyes steady and luminous, the wind pressing her auburn hair against cheeks flushed with the night's chill, her simple gown of deep emerald clinging to her form like a second skin, textured with the subtle weave of hand-spun wool that spoke of her healer's humble roots. At 35, her body hummed with quiet strength, the faded scars of captivity now badges of resilience, but her hand rested instinctively on her abdomen, a subtle revelation swelling within, life conceived in the passionate aftermath of battles won, a child that promised to bind their worlds irrevocably. Her traumas, once anchors of despair, the sea's theft of her parents, the village's rejection, the mill's chains, faded into echoes, supplanted by desires crystallized in family and transcendence, to shield Alara, to embrace eternity not as curse, but as shared horizon. "Eternity as curse or gift," she echoed, her voice soft yet resolute, laced with philosophical gravity. "For Alara, for the life we carry, for us. The beauty of suffering lies in this choice, to let love illuminate the abyss." Celine stepped forward from the shadows, her movements fluid and ethereal, the wind barely disturbing her raven tresses that flowed like liquid night. Her burgundy gown rustled faintly, embroidered with subtle lunar motifs that shimmered in the moonlight, her pale skin almost translucent. Crimson eyes holding a depth of quiet evolution, from the abandoned dhampir adrift in centuries of crypts and courts to the steadfast pillar of this nascent family. Her unspoken romance with Thorn had transmuted through fire's forge into a sisterly devotion, profound and unyielding, her desires now aligned with protection, redemption found in yielding to greater lights. In her hands, she cradled the remnants of the lunar shard, no longer a destructive force, but a conduit purified by prior rituals, its facets pulsing with inner luminescence like a captured heartbeat. "The final rite awaits your word," she said, her tone compassionate yet shadowed, extending the crystal as if offering a key to locked destinies. blood and intent will seal it, mortal to eternal, or eternity tempered by choice. The ceremony unfolded under the moon's impassive gaze, the air humming with arcane tension, textures alive and immersive, the wind's chill raising gooseflesh on exposed skin, the stone's cool bite underfoot, the rose's perfume intensifying as if breathing in sync with the rite. Thorn drew a slender ritual dagger from his belt, its blade engraved with runes that glowed faintly silver, and pricked his palm with deliberate precision, immortal blood welling forth, dark and viscous, rich with the coppery tang of ages, dripping onto the shard's surface with a soft hiss that sparked ethereal vapors. From death's unyielding embrace, I choose life anew. For the pack, for the light you've brought, he intoned, his voice weaving ancient words drawn from the citadel's deepest lore, ethics guiding each syllable like a compass through moral tempests. Leora followed without hesitation, her hand steady as she mirrored the cut, mortal blood flowing brighter, warmer, mingling with his in a sacred confluence that made the shard thrum audibly, vibrations traveling up their arms like a shared pulse. Pain bloomed sharp and exquisite in her veins, but she held his gaze, tears glistening unshed. For the suffering that forges us, for love's inevitable dawn, I embrace the eternal, not in shadow, but in your light. The words carried her essence, trauma redeemed, desires fulfilled in this transcendence, the unborn child's kick a faint affirmation within. Celine added her essence next, a shallow slice yielding her hybrid blood, a mesmerizing swirl of crimson and shadow that deepened the mixture's glow. For bonds that outlast blood, for redemption in service, she vowed, her voice a silken thread, loyalty sealing the triad's unity. Ilara, roused gently from her slumber and brought to the balcony by the nursemaid, rubbed sleep from her eyes, her small face alight with innocent trust. Guided by Leora's encouraging nod, she placed her tiny hand atop the pooling blood, her touch pure and unscarred, a child's light that ignited the shard into blinding radiance. No words from her, only a soft gasp as warmth spread, her presence the rite's innocent capstone. Light erupted from the crystal in a cascade of warm gold and silver, coursing through their joined hands like liquid fire, illuminating the tower in a halo that banished the night's chill. Leora's body arched in transformation, veins igniting with immortal vitality, a symphony of sensation. The exquisite burn of rebirth rippling from core to limbs, like flames dancing beneath skin without consuming, her pulse sinking eternally with thorns. Mortality's fragile thread weaving into unbreakable silver. Pain crested and receded, leaving euphoria in its wake. No death claimed her, no tragic severance. Instead, a shared forever, love's redemption absolute and profound, the curse of separation lifted in waves of transcendent joy. Ilara giggled as the light enveloped her too, a gentle infusion that promised her own safeguarded future, while Celine stood bathed in the glow, her Dhampir nature resonating in harmony. The pack below erupted in unified howls, a triumphant chorus rising to the stars, the night alive with primal hope and the scent of pine sharpened by magic's afterglow. The rose's petals, scattered on the wind, carried outward like blessings on ethereal wings, each one a fragment of their story drifting into the world. Yet as dawn crested the eastern horizon, painting the mist in strokes of fire and rose, Thorn drew Leora closer, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling in the cooling air. The wind carried a final sigh, soft as a lover's whisper, as he murmured, "We've chosen light within the shadows, redemption in eternity's embrace. Tragedy redeemed, choices honored. Their family stood woven as one, oscillating no longer between fragile life and boundless night, but harmonized in a tapestry of enduring love, the citadel's spires standing sentinel to their immortal dawn. The story's echo faded into infinity's vast hush, leaving only the rose's lingering perfume and the quiet promise of tomorrow's unbound. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned.